Hello there, I'm Philip Doddy and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Marl Crusts of Lough Carra. Now, if you take a walk around the shore of a marl lake such as Lough Carra, you might notice that the rocks along the lake shore and in the shallow water are covered with a strange whitish, quite slippery layer. Now, this is a marl crust, and I spent a few years studying these crusts in Lough Carra and also in some other lakes. So I'm going to tell you about a few of the things that I found out about them. Now, if you take a piece of marl crust from the lakeshore and cut a cross section through it, you'll see there's a green layer just beneath the surface, and then below that will be a soft, whitish, quite crumbly sort of layer made up of fine grains. Now, a magnified view of the green material shows the many living things that live within it, a community of tiny life forms. Most of them are actually types of cyanobacteria. These are ancient organisms. They can grow as clusters of cells or as long filaments of cells, or indeed as interwoven masses, depending on the particular species that are there. Cyanobacteria have actually been around for billions of years, and some of the earliest traces of life on Earth are microfossils of cyanobacteria. Other things that you'll see under the microscope, various sorts of algae, green algae especially. You see those in the living layers of the marl crust. One especially attractive group are diatoms. Each one has an outer transparent shell which is made of silica. These tiny glassy cases often have quite exquisite patterns of minute perforations and slits on the surface. There is a recently discovered species of diatom. It's found in Lough Carra and also some other limestone lakes, and it has actually been named in honour of Lough Carra as called Incyonopsis carraensis. As well as the diatoms and the algae, you'd also see little animals that live in the marl crusts. Some of them are microscopic, such as nematode worms that slither among the tiny marl grains. Some bigger animals live in the crusts as well. Thick crusts, and they do grow several centimetres in thickness. They often have cavities or hollows, so you get small animals like beetles, flatworms, caddisfly larvae. Spiders can be found living in them. There's actually a particularly rare beetle called Actibius nielsonii, which recently has been found living in the Lough Carra crust. Well, one of the questions that people often ask is, can these crusts tell us something about the lake water, the quality of the water in Lough Carra? For a marl lake in Ireland like Lough Carra, leaching of nutrients into lake water is a particularly troublesome problem. The reason it's so troublesome is because these lakes are naturally very low in nutrients. So the various creatures, plants and so on that live in them are adapted to that low nutrient state. So then when the concentrations of nutrients, especially certain things like phosphorus and nitrogen, are increased, various things start to happen in the lake. Water, which was previously very clear and clean, gradually becomes cloudy and sort of greenish in colour. And this is due to the growth and proliferation of algal cells in the water, the plankton. The rocks or the marl growing along the shore starts to take on a kind of a slimy green appearance again because of the algal growth. And then you get floating green scums appearing in the water, and these can be washed up on the shore. Some of the underwater plants will die, whereas emergent plants like reeds can actually spread into areas which would have been open water previously. And then in terms of the animals, some of the insects like the mayflies go into decline and they can eventually disappear, and certain fish populations also are affected because some native fish species can no longer survive in these kind of conditions. Well, this nutrient pollution also affects the marl crusts. As the quality of the water gets worse, the chlorophyll rises in the crusts because of the growth of a lot of green algae, as I said, and the percentage cover of rocks on the lakeshore by the crust also decreases as the crusts gradually degrade and start to fall apart. So by measuring these things, we can actually detect and measure the changes that are happening in a lake like Lough Carra, and it turns out that the marl crusts are particularly sensitive ways of measuring these changes. The good news is that when the quality of water in a lake improves, the marl crusts, with their whole community of cyanobacteria, algae, little animals, they do gradually come back and recover over time if conditions are improved. Well, we've talked a little bit about the marl crusts that are found in Lough Carra. I think it's important to remember as well that Lough Carra is special in many ways. The rarity of the habitats, the biodiversity, and the beauty of the landscape. And it's a lake that's important to many people, but I think none more so than the people who live around the shore and in the catchment and people who drink the water from the lake. And of course, it is for these people in particular and for the future generations that Lough Carra should be preserved and treasured. Thank you very much for listening.